Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. New week, new theme. This theme is tasteful solos. I didn't think I specifically put out a requirement for it to be guitars, but something tells me we're going to get a lot of guitar solos this week. To me, what a tasteful solo represents is one that supports the storytelling component of the song and predominantly doesn't feature heavy technicality to the performance itself, in that it doesn't focus primarily on shredding and fast playing and highly technical skills. It is one that puts the music first before the performer, the artist. And that's not to say that pure shred can't be tasteful in the way that it might work well with a song, such as when we checked out Vector last week. If they didn't shred the whole solo, it would have felt out of place. But to me, tasteful simply means that, again, that the majority of it is going to be more emotive rather than more technical. And to kick that off, we're going to be looking at Steven Wilson's Drive Home. Now, I was thinking that this might be Steven Wilson doing the guitar solo, but I have been told that Guthrie Govan is the guitarist for this, at least for the solo section. So let's dive into this track, see what Steven Wilson is bringing to the table today. Another one of these beautifully animated music videos. Much like, We Have Routine? Had something about a raven previously that we've looked at. Yeah, so very introspective to start with, and for some reason these bells sort of feel like memory music to me.
You need to clear away all the jets out in your brain and face the truth. Well, I can make amends, but while the darkness always ends, you're still alone. So try.
Ooh. The semi-resolution on that final chord. There's one bar in here that's a little short. That one right there, I think was at 3 beats.
You need to clear away all the jets in your brain.
Very Pink Floyd with the vocal production. I love the acoustic guitars pushed way out to the side.
While the darkness always ends, you're still alone. So try.
Yeah, the slides into the notes is so good. Especially pairing it against the violin. Piano thrown in little ornamental things. Yeah, shifting the accent points from the downbeats to the offbeats. Love the way the bass plays around with the guitar here. There's a really interesting style of imperfection going on in the guitar performance that absolutely works. An interesting place to wrap the song up. The Raven That Refused to Sing. That's the one. Is it over? Is the rest just... Well, nobody watches the rest of it, so... And I'm guessing this one peak right here is where the guitar solo starts. Yeah, that's the end of the track. See, I find some really interesting points of that. The first one being dynamics, specifically volume dynamics. There is no moments in the first like 5 minutes that we hit the peak. The song starts out exceptionally quiet and raises in volume continuously over the course of those 5 minutes. Give or take. Whenever the guitar solo comes in, strong. I think it would be about the time the music video did the flashback to the car crash. I just remember seeing red out of the corner of my eye. So about that point was when we peaked on our volume. Everything before that is a gradual rise, and I think that's really interesting. It isn't just that there is dynamic volume in this song where some parts are actually quieter than others, but that it's a linear growth. It isn't that the verses are quieter than the choruses or something like that. It's that the song gets louder over time. To me, this says something very significant. I don't know what it is yet, but it is not a typical choice. It is something that requires intent. It's not something you just accidentally do. It's not something that you put into your song while you're following a blueprint, a cookie cutter design choice that everybody does. This feels intentful. I'm not sure what it means yet, though. As we get more into the song, maybe even the lyrics, that might answer itself to me. But as of right now, it's just something that stands out very dominantly as a unique element to the track. And I think it's interesting that after we reach a peak, volume wise, the dynamic elements aren't done being added to the track. We're just done with volume. What happens after this point is that the guitar solo has reached its main element where we're jumping back and forth between faster, more chaotic lines and longer, like tons of guitar bends, very emotive display, and we're jumping back and forth between these two styles of guitar work. The volume's at a max level, but underneath this, we're adding layer after layer after layer after layer. It just continues to build. We have a sort of a vertical dynamic element coming in there with how many instruments are playing at one time. This is something that we played around with earlier, but functions more or less in a manner I would expect, where some sections just have more layers or stacked higher than other sections, and it creates contrast through that dynamic quality, but there isn't a buildup of it. So after we have our volume build up and reach a peak, we still increase the intensity of the song. We're not done adding extra components to it to build the song up further. And I find this to be really interesting, is that the intensity of the track increases over time and decreases in some sections based on these two parameters, volume and layers. And when one hits a peak, that's where the other comes in and picks up the slack, says, you can't do anymore. I'm going to push the song even higher my way. And they're just utilized in ways that work together to create a nice ebb and flow to the track, but allow it also to reach peaks that neither one can do on its own. Very cool style of writing and a great way to keep, at least me, I was going to say keep an audience engaged, but I don't know who's really paying attention to stuff like this while they listen to it. Definitely keeps me engaged, though, on a first time listen, hearing all these little things. And honestly, that's kind of what I expect from Steven Wilson. I think I mentioned this during the last Porcupine Tree reaction, is that Steven does a really good job of having these little nuances right there on the surface. And I think that's why Steven's reactions, the analysis portions for them, anyways, are always some of my favorite to listen back to and to go back and check out what my thoughts were and how my thoughts have changed over time on the song, because it gives me a lot to talk about always, every time. And it's because he puts it right there on the surface. It's not deep. It's not something that's going to take 10 listens to figure out. He wants you to, get it on the first time. And I appreciate that. It's not. I guess you could say that his writing tends to be a little bit shallower than maybe some other prog rock writers, in that they hide their nuance, or they hide their writing underneath nuance, stuff that you have to figure out with familiarity. But I appreciate Steve's willingness to put some of this stuff right there on the surface. I'm sure there is elements that he puts underneath that he hides a little bit that do require some familiarity to understand some more nuanced decisions he makes with his writing. But there's plenty still on the surface that I can listen to it once and just be like, yes, there's like, let's talk about this, let's talk about this, let's talk about how all this works together to create this feeling, to create that vibe. And I have a shelf is what YouTube calls them. It's kind of a dumb. There's a row of videos on my page. You just go to, youtube.com/@criticalreactions, and the very first one is highlights. These are the analyses that I think are some of my best works, where I really dive into what makes the song great or how the music theory is, making it's impactful to the song and the listener. I think there's a not insignificant percentage of those videos are Steven Wilson or Porcupine Tree tracks, and it's because of this reasoning right here. When I listen to this music, I just have a really strong grasp over what is happening on every level, and I attribute that to Steve's writing. I can't see what's not there. He puts this stuff in his music, and it's clear enough for me to see, but still effective enough to have deep dives into. And something like this, the balancing and power shifting between the volume and the layering and how they impact the intensity of the track over time it's just so masterfully done, and I picked up on it real quick. Very few bands work like that for me. Now there is a story to this song, and there is a deeper story too, I assume. If you watch the music video, I caught some glimpses of it. I would say it's about somebody who lost someone dear to them, and they're fighting with the memory of that, which I think is interesting because wasn't Routine about the same thing? About letting yourself fall into a routine so that you don't have to think about a lost loved one. Oh, it's been a couple years. I might be misremembering that. And I don't remember what the Raven was. The Raven that refused to sing. I know we did that song too, but I can't remember what that track was about. But anyways, the music tells a story too, and I think this is interesting because it subverts a little bit of my understanding of the music video, though I don't think I checked out like the last few moments. All I remember is the trauma, right? The pain, the heartache that this person experienced. Maybe the ending of the video tells something that leans into this, but there's a lot of brightness in the song. I mentioned the beginning starts out rather introspective, and then the glockenspiel comes in, and to me, for whatever reason, I think it's a combination of that timbre with the harmony that he was using, the key. It felt like dream music or memory music. It's a little twinkling that you kind of expect with the little swirly animation in the video to tell you, hey, we're exploring someone's memory now. I don't know why that specifically came to mind, but it did. And a lot of the opening of this song sort of danced around that idea of introspection. A little bit of calm with some tension to it, some pain. Bittersweet, I think, is the word that comes to mind for the first 4-ish minutes of this song. But I don't think bittersweet covers it entirely because the sweet part. See, I think I use the word bittersweet not because it is both good and bad, but because it is both positive and negative, which isn't technically an accurate use of that descriptor. The thing is that the negative side definitely has some pain to it, but the positive side to me feels like joy. Does anybody else get that? I get it particularly in like the wider strings and the choirs on the outside, the chords that they move through, they tend to be rather not joyous. Let me rephrase that. Uplifting. That's the feeling right there. It's a mix of introspection, a longing for the past, pain, and uplifting. I don't have a word that I can just succinctly say those emotions are blank. Maybe there's some word in another language that purposely captures that whole vibe. I don't know one though. That's what it is. It is a very complex emotional landscape that's crafted in this song. And what I find most interesting is that it's sort of a mix of everything. It's not like the chord progression specifically goes through all that. The different instruments are presenting all those components on their own. As I mentioned, the choir on the background has more of an uplifting both timbre and chord progression to it. The sorrow comes from another instrument. The introspection comes from another instrument. The longing comes from another instrument. It's not that the song itself is moving through all these. It's that each instrument represents a portion of this complex emotion. Which leads me to the vocals then, which I find are they're kind of neutral. And I can't wait to get to the lyrics to figure out what he's singing about here. But it almost feels like it's trying to be the glue that ties everything together. It sometimes leans towards one way a specific note might carry a somber component to it, but for the most part, it feels like it's trying to be a medium that pulls all these together. And I find that wild because, the first word I thought of was apathetic. It's not leaning towards any of the emotions, but I don't think that's actually the right word for it. It's not that it doesn't care, it's that it's just trying to be. If this is a song about somebody trying to exist while feeling the pain of this, somebody having left um, this world, someone dear to them, much like routine, it's about trying to find a way to push forward, to not let these emotions overwhelm you. This is sort of what I think the voice might be trying to be, that neutrality that is required to balance everything and not fall apart in your day-to-day life. I don't know if that's necessarily what Stephen was going for there, but I think that's my best read on it, especially since the vocal line itself tends to be a bit muted. There's only a handful of notes that it sings within. It just kind of stays within this one little range. There's not a lot of expressiveness to it. There's no yelling or screaming or forcefulness to it. It's a very calm, soothing, neutral style of volume and delivery. It doesn't even really feel like there's an aggression to it or a sadness. It's not completely withheld where the note barely breaks out, where it's just on the cusp of the vocal cords not vibrating properly, but it's also not delivered in an aggressive way either, where it's pushed forward for whatever reason, whether that's anger or pain or sorrow. There's no heightened emotion to the vocal delivery either. It sort of just is. Like I said, it sits as a neutral point between the varying extremities in the music. And of course, all of this leads to a head. The guitar solo. It comes in initially, which I thought was interesting too. For solo week, knowing that this was a guitar solo, I kind of expected a guitar in here frequently. It If I had thought about some of the past Steven Wilson songs that we've checked out, particularly even from this album, I might have not expected that going in. But the guitar doesn't come until late. It's not really a guitar solo. The guitar is the solo instrument. It doesn't do anything else in the band. It solos. That's it. It takes the lead melody once the vocals are done. And what I love about this is it starts out with a ton of bends and slides, basically slurring notes together. There's no distinction between two pitches, just one gradually rises up and becomes another. We're not doing stepwise stuff here where we have a C and then a D. It's just we gradually lean into the next note, whether it's going up or going down. It is, to me, an embodiment of all of these disparate emotions being smashed together and being forced to feel them all at once. They're not things that you can just say, this is me when I'm mad, this is me when I'm sad, this is me when I'm longing for stuff, when I'm melancholic. I am all of this at once. There's no distinction between them. And I can slide between them and experience all of the multitudes as I move from one state to another kind of vibe. But there's also this really strong emotiveness to it because of the time it takes to move from one idea to the next. One of the things I love about blues guitar solos is Well, the bends and the slides, the fact that it feels very human to experience sadness in that way. I don't know what it is. I probably should do a deep dive on blues guitar solos one day and figure out why they feel as evocative as they do. But you give me an electric guitarist and he's out there bending and sliding away and not really picking specific notes to move to, but just leaning into them, and you're just gonna make me start bawling. It happens all the time. I find it to be just a hyper expressive area of rock music. Um, and this, I mean, it pulls out those same emotions to me. It's just, but it doesn't stop there. We introduced this sliding technique for quite a few bars. We stick with it for a while, and then the guitarist decides to move into a melodic range. Instead of creating something that feels emotionally evocative, we're moving into something that is a bit more compositionally sound. And we once again explore the variety of sounds. When you listen to the guitar solo, some beats might feel a bit brighter, not necessarily joyous, but uplifting. Some are somber, some are more neutral and introspective. It's sort of all over the place, tying everything together into a singular experience that increases in speed. At one point, the drums come in and introduce a triplet vibe that makes it feel like the whole song begins to drag for a moment. This whole thing lends itself to being the emotional spiral. That's how I take it. Because not long after this, we start getting into the shreddy guitar stuff and harmonically move away from a lot of the consonant harmonies that we have expressing the emotions on display throughout the track, and more into chaotic harmonies that introduce dissonance and noise, utilizing very tense dyads that are only exacerbated by the distortion and overdrive on the guitar. It turns into a flurry, a whirlwind of pain. The consistently adding layers, more instruments being built up under the guitar that has reached its volumetric peak. I don't think it's how you can use volumetric. Reaching its volume peak. Just over here making up new words. It has swelled to its capacity, and the song comes in under to raise the intensity, to make it feel not just that you're spiraling into these intense emotions, but that you are now drowning within them. Which I think is accurate, because it just dawned on me as I said drowning that there is a scene where the dude fell into water. I don't know if that was around this point or not, but yeah, so visually drowning and auditorily drowning are both aspects of this multimedia project. Even the guitar solo, which at times can even lend itself to feel like wailing or screaming, begins to get hard to hear with all these extra layers being built up around it. This is why I mentioned that it's interesting the song ends this way. We sort of just fade out that solo to nothing, to silence, without really wrapping it up. There is no end to it. There's no nice cap. It's not something that just finishes. There's no clean ending to it. It sort of just stops at some time. And if you've ever emotionally spiraled, that kind of feels like what it is. If you're lucky, you just snap out of it and you're brought back to a sort of neutrality and almost a emotionless void, which is sort of how it ends. We just have a little fade out on an acoustic guitar, I think it was. Although this ending could represent quite a lot of things that are just sort of a subtle and immediate end to a chaotic moment. Now, there is one last thing I want to talk about regarding this guitar solo before we head into the lyrics, and that is, I don't know how to describe it, so take this with a grain of salt. The sloppiness of it. Now, Guthrie is not a sloppy player. One of the best guitarists that I think I've heard. I'd certainly put him in, the top 10 lists of guitarists. And I've only heard a few things from him, but he's just consistently fantastic. So this would be an intentional sloppiness, I believe. There are some interesting moments in here where it seems like his left and right hand are deliberately out of sync, where he strums just before he moves his fretting hand to the next note, or just after, so we get a little bit of a slide into it and then the strum, but the strum would be behind the beat. It would feel like it's dragging. And the only way I can read this is, pertaining to this person's psyche. It's slowly unraveling. It's becoming less precise, more sloppy. The emotions are beginning to overwhelm this person. And I think it's a really interesting decision to do. We don't really hear a lot of it in the beginning of the guitar solo. And as the solo goes on, we hear less and less of it as we push towards more technical playing, faster ideas, the flurry whirlwind of notes. But I think when we're in those more emotive sections and we hear these ideas being present, that's what it tells me. It's about characterizing this person and adding a performative layer to it. I don't even know how you would write that on paper, other than just put the words strum before or after your fretting hand moves. Like it's something that you just kind of have to instinctively know. Like I said, as far as I know, there's not really sheet music way to represent this as far as writing notes down. And it adds a lot to the experience, at least for me. It showcases another characteristic of the playing that comes out in not too dissimilar a way than the bends and the faster playing and the shift towards more harmonic dissonance. It's a decision that on its own can be seen as something not great, and it's something that I've called out in other bands, sloppy playing, before. But in the context of this, listening to everything going on around it and pulling it all together, we get a really strong picture of what this person is experiencing. That's a combination of the notes played and how they were played on the instrument. And I find it to be a fascinating detail that I don't know many guitarists would have leaned into, and it's such an inspired decision by Guthrie to do that. With that said, let's dive into some lyrics. It is lyrically a song about somebody who is driving a car, gets into an accident, and the passenger is the one who dies. I don't know that I made that connection from the music video, but it's about not just the pain of their loss, but the grief of knowing you were in control. You were the one driving the car. And even if it wasn't your fault, say you were completely obeying the rules and, the rules of the road, and you get T-boned by someone who ran a red light or something, you still feel a little bit of that grief. What if you were paying attention just a little bit better? All those what ifs that are going to pop into your brain. What if there was a yellow light that you ran a little bit earlier? If you had just stopped at that one, you wouldn't have been at this intersection as earlier. Those kind of ideas are just going to be flooding your minds. All the little things you could have done to avoid the situation. And so the first verse opens up with the setting right after the incident. Cold window pane, a car upturned in the rain, wait on in vain. But it says, don't try to bear the blame, just deal with the pain and dust down your wings again. The idea that you need to move on from this. Don't blame yourself. Don't, feel the pain, experience the grief, go through what you need to, but keep going. This is something that is seen in verse 2 as well. It says it's a pause without end, a moment in time suspends. How could she leave? Once again, describing the emotions exactly at the moment of the incident, and then providing insight. Release all your guilt and grieve. Give up your pain and hold up your head. Again, it's about learning to move on after such an incident. And I like the chorus. It says you need to clear away all the jetsam in your brain, all that garbage that's holding you down, the weight, the baggage of it all. You need to let it go. It says face the truth. Love can make amends, but darkness always ends. Either way, you're still alone, so drive home. Just keep on living. If you allow the darkness to overtake you and you succumb to it, possibly committing suicide, it is now the loss of two lives. You need to learn how to get past this. Deal with the grief, come out the other side with your head up, and live for them, if nothing else. It's a beautiful message. Now, what's interesting is this song pretty much only has one annotation on Genius, and it's for the guitar solo. And this is what's awesome. It says that Guthrie did a few takes on this. All of them were one-shot takes. All of them were unique. All of them were improvised. Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, Guthrie is he's a fantastic guitarist. Steven says that he took either the first or the second solo that he laid down. He was inspired by it. It was beautiful, had great storytelling, completely unedited, one take. He said it was unbelievably brilliant, and it was improvised. He didn't plan any of it. He just came in and started playing. What I find more interesting, though, is that Steven actually did a solo of his own for this section. That solo can be found on a demo of this song, which I'm kind of intrigued by. I think I'm going to go listen to that after the video and see what Steven's interpretation of this was, what he originally had it going before Guthrie came in and dropped his solo down. But it's little things like that. I love it. Like, movies have behind the scenes stuff, right? Usually put onto the DVDs as a Blu-rays. You can watch the making of, see how things were put together, bloopers, stuff like that. But Disney does the stuff with their Marvel movies. I think they're called like Deassembled or something like that, where you can watch, how everything came together, including blooper reels and stuff. I love looking at that because I love seeing how things were before it was finished, things that never made it to the cut, deleted scenes and stuff like that. We don't really have that in the music world outside of the rare case that a band decides to release some demos or an entire album of cut content from something else. I don't know that many bands do that either. The only one I can think of off the top of my head is the Used's Shallow Believers, which was basically a bunch of bonus tracks from their third album that never made the cut. And it ended up being like an extra 8 songs on top of what they already put out for their third album. But we don't really get to see this side of music. And I love it. I love the fact that there is a version of this song that is out there that is this track with Steven's solo on it rather than Guthrie's. I kind of wish more artists would do that. All right. Those are my thoughts. Steven Wilson's Drive Home. Everything works together here I feel like I say that every time we get a Steve Wilson track on. I hope he doesn't mind me calling him Steve Wilson. Steven Wilson. I feel like I say that every time for his works, though. It's just, like I mentioned at the beginning, when I listen to his music, I just get it. It makes a ton of sense to me. And I feel like these always tend to be pretty long. Like a 6-7 minute song or a 40-minute analysis here. The ratio is always pretty large for his works. But yeah, he always gives me something to talk about that I think's worthwhile. And as usual, like I said, the lyrics perfectly match up with what's going on in the music. It's the pain, it's the suffering, but it's about moving on. It's about getting up. It's uplifting. The song, half of the verse is always about pressing forward, about just getting through it. It's words of advice, and I think that's where the uplifting choir sound comes from in this, and that it's trying to push that directive forward musically that's present in the lyrics. Just beautiful stuff all the way through. But like I said, those are just my thoughts. What are yours? Drop down in the comments what you thought of this track, if there was anything I missed or anything you'd like to correct me on, anything that I just didn't lean into far enough and you think I should have taken further. Let me know all that as well as your thoughts, perspectives, opinions, all that stuff. Drop that in the comment section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. We do have a special selection coming up next. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC, as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.